Welcome to the Heal Always podcast. I'm your friendly neighborhood counselor, Dr. Will, and I'm so excited. Wellness and welcomes to you all. I'm really happy that we get to take the time out to just really talk about healing on another level. The thing is that in this type of world, we have to be ready for the unexpected. And living in a world that has a world, a relationship, and a personal relationship, we have to understand what is it that we value the most. And so far, you have learned about reset, removing every saturation, embracing truth. You learned about the holistic ideologies and the identities that are needed. You're learning about the different health modalities, right? The physical, emotional, social, environmental, family, all of those, right? All 8. Now we have to move into the harder part of the conversation. So let me give you a quick background. During the pandemic, I did research studying physicians and seeing how they were affected by treating patients, working in hospitals, having endless hours of just dedication and devotion, going beyond their Hippocratic oath, going beyond their own traumas, and having to just be healers beyond their limits. And through my research, I did a qualitative analysis and a thematic analysis on how to look at the perception of moral distress. And so remember from the last episode, moral distress is defined as knowing the right thing to do, but because of an institutional or organizational constraint, you cannot perform at your best ability. And it causes secondary traumas like burnout, compassion fatigue, job life satisfaction, negativity, and also overdrive. And so through the research, I found that there was actually this pattern that was happening. And this pattern really kind of like changed my whole mind. And it made me create the term secondary healing because I found this new term called emotional malignancy. And emotional malignancy is done in 5 steps. So it's 5 patterns, right? So it's this pattern of 5 things that are happening. And we're going to get into this. So make sure you get your purpose pen, your purpose paper. Make sure you get your tea. Make sure you breathe. So let's make sure you breathe real quick. Just real quick. In. Out. Follow my hand. In. Hold. Out. One more time. In. Hold it. Out. One more time. In. You're doing good. Keep it up. Hold. Out. Good. I hope you have your tea with you, right? Hope you have your tea with you. So let's talk about emotional malignancies. Emotional malignancies are the result of emotional callousing. So when you look at an emotional malignancy, the first step, write this down, okay, is you react. So what I noticed is that people were reacting to situations and not responding to them. So it almost created this fight or flight mentality that created this sense of, immediacy, right? I'm just reacting. I'm doing what I know because this is all I have left. So it's really coming from a place of scarcity, and it's coming from a place of not knowing the outcome and not knowing what may or may not happen, right? So the first thing is reaction, right? Reacting. The second step is rationalization. The doctors were actually rationalizing their wellness. They were rationalizing their wellness. They were rationalizing their trauma. They're rationalizing their reactions. So they would take a really hard moment and then say, well, this is what I signed up for. This is what I'm here for. This is what I do. And so they would actually also rationalize how they needed help as well. So they would actually remove themselves and they would devote themselves to the actual issue. Next up, there would be remorse. So that can be considered as shame or guilt. So when it comes to remorse, the doctors would actually have this moment where they would actually question. They would actually question their actual like choices that they made in the hospital with their patients. They would actually have this moment where they would have shame or guilt about what they had to choose because they felt helpless or they felt powerless in that moment, or they felt unsupported or unguided because there was these barriers, these constraints that were not conducive to their wellness to be the healers that they needed to be for their patients. Then we move on to um, resentment. So then after a while, they become so emotionally calloused, right? Where they feel things, but they had to deny them over and over again. It almost created this sense of avoidance. And they had a resentment towards these infrastructures or the organization or the hospital because they would ask them to actually go beyond their capacity. So they resent the actual organizations for who they had to be. Then the last one is regret. So this is the shoulda, woulda, coulda moment. This is where they ended up actually having regret for being the person they had to be, or the person they could have, or the person they had to be for the patient, or they could have been better. They should have been better. They should have thought more. It was almost like this regret. So think about this. For almost 3 to 5 years straight, there was this reaction, this rationalization, this remorse, this resentment, and this regret. Patient after patient, day after day, day in, day out. These healthcare professionals were living this way for quite some time. And it created this numbing or this emotional malignancy. And so, what happens when you deny emotions? It lives inside of you, it stays inside of you. It changes the way you feel about yourself, it changes the way that you value yourself in relationships. And it also removes you from the value of who you are to this world. And so, this is about self concept, not self esteem. So, just to give a background, self esteem is more about the way you feel about yourself. You can have a good, fair, or poor way you feel about yourself. How do you feel about yourself, right? Sometimes when you have poor self esteem, it kind of makes you remove yourself from people, places, and things. It might kind of change your confidence about things. Having a good self esteem makes you more willing and open and inviting to the different situations, right? And it keeps you motivated. But in self concept is described as, well, who am I based upon the way people treat me? You define yourself based upon the interactions that you receive from others and the interactions that you may have with others. And you judge your world based upon how others may perceive you or view you or treat you. And so, how do you believe yourself to be based upon the world that is around you? Okay. So, think about emotional malignancies is that these emotions would not be expressed. And when you can't live with that, these emotions almost become cancerous, right? It can eat at you from the inside out, right? And so what malignancies do is it kind of shapes the way that you value your emotional wellness, how you value your emotional self, how you look at yourself, how you may even dedicate your life to other people based upon how you value yourself. So it's so important to understand that when it comes to emotional wellness, these malignancies can live inside of you. So, side quest, ask yourself this: what is something that I'm living through that feels like it's done, but I know that if I address it, I might have to start over again? Is that really resolved? Right? An emotional malignancy might look like anger, right? You have anger, and you may think that you're done with something. You may think that you're finished with something, but you still get triggered in the same way. And you might feel that in your body. How do you get that out? How do you remove those feelings from your life? Like we said before, mental illness is not the problem. It's how you live through it. And so the way that you're living through your emotions may be emotionally malignant. And so it's important to understand that the things that you have unresolved in your life or things that you may have unresolved with others, that lives inside of you, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. And the fact that you don't acknowledge it can create a harsher affect at the end of it all. So it's really important to understand what feelings you may have inside of you that you may not have released yet, or you may have expressed yet. And so, some ways to cope with that is to have artistic expression. So, for me, I do music, I'm a musician. I like to do art as a way. Sometimes people color it out, sometimes you may work out. That's a great way to do it. Sometimes you have to get it out of your body. So, working out is a really great way. Also, where you consuming food, right? That's physical health modality, right? And so physical health modality, what you're putting into your body also is what you're putting out of your body. It's very important. And being a health psychologist, I really find that a lot of our needs are truly based upon what's missing in our life. And so it's important to address how your emotions and how your feelings may or may not be conducive to your lifestyle, right? Because the whole goal here is to make healing a lifestyle. You want to make healing a lifestyle at all times. And so when it comes to these emotional malignancies, what I noticed in my research is that these doctors, I call them maverick doctors. So I coined that term as well. Maverick doctors, they would go beyond their roles and they would go out their way for clients or for patients just because they knew what the patient actually needed and they knew that the hospital would not provide that. So this is almost a moment of ethical obligation and moral distress, right? You're knowing the right thing to do, but you have an ethical duty that is actually immoral. What do you do? So I know that was a lot. Let's take a break real quick. Make sure you get this tea real quick, right? So let's do a quick review. So in an emotional malignancy, it's understanding that we have emotions that have yet to be expressed because we are reacting to the situation. We're rationalizing our worth. We have shame or guilt, remorse about the situation itself. We have resentment for how things turned out, maybe not in favor or not within the consideration. And then regret, the potential that was lost. Now, I want to kind of bring this to more of a light, okay? I want to make this more culturally attentive. Think about our lives in this culture right now, in this American culture, in this lifestyle. There is an obligation culturally as people, as human beings, that we feel like we should care for other people, how we should care for other people, how we should love one another, how we should treat each other. However, there's a society that creates this infrastructure of oppression, systematic obligation, and this type of unnatural, immoral moments in life. And we have created such a unique disposition because some of us feel highly dedicated and devoted to things that are not reciprocating. And I really want us to understand that when you are not feeling aligned with yourself, you're not feeling aligned with who you are, what you want to be, who you want to be for other people, it becomes almost unhealthy to the point where this emotional malignancy is formed, right? You might be more reactive to people and things. You might rationalize, well, am I tripping? Maybe I am just overreactive, or, oh, it's not me. It's not me. It can't be me. Oh, I'm going to get through it again. I'm just going to work a lot harder. I'm just going to work a little bit more. That's okay. Right. And then you start having shame or guilt, fear about being who you are. You might have shame about who you are. You might have shame about your authenticity. You might have guilt about, oh, well, they may not benefit if I do this. I feel bad that they're going to benefit and I'm not. So now you're rationalizing your authenticity about who you are. You're limiting your own greatness because the thought of what other people may think or feel about you. Or, hey, I'm not going to go out to that cookout because, I don't like seeing that family member, but I feel obligated to go. So now you have shame or guilt about not being around your family. That's an emotional malignancy. It's knowing and acknowledging and having the irresponsibility emotionally, being emotionally irresponsible about what you need from that situation and being honest about what you really need to say. And think about this. How many times you actually deny yourself in a day about what you really want to do, what you want to feel? And now you're doing this into your own heart. This is why this emotional malignancy emotionally calluses you. And then you have resentment. You might feel a way about things. You might feel a way about situations. You might feel a way about how things are not really aligned and seen in you. Right? That can actually happen. And then lastly is the regret. I may have regret about the person you could have been, right? Regret about the person you should have been, what you were actually available for, but you chose not to. So it's really important to understand that there is a balance in all of this. And it's very important to learn about how you might be cycling through your life emotionally, personally, relationally, and it's not actually coming to fruition because you forgot the one thing that mattered, which is you. So I want this to be very understood and very aware, just because there is a level of seriousness. Because if you don't deal with this, what happens is you start ending up having these secondary traumas. You start getting burnout. You start having compassion fatigue. You start creating these unhealthy moments. You start creating these unhealthy experiences with other people. You even may end up getting codependent experiences in relationships. You might date just to date, right? And it's very unintentional. And then you start becoming what they need and not who you are, right? You might compromise your own integrity. So it's so important to understand what's needed for you, what's needed between other people, and also what's needed to make sure you have a healthy boundary. And so if we don't talk about this, then we miss out on what reset is and how important reset is going to be for you in your life. So in reset, we actually want to make sure that the emotional malignancies are identified. So this usually happens around the second or third principle. But we'll get to that because that's actually the next topic. But emotional malignancies is how we understand how people are dealing with the world. So remember we talked about the world, the relationship, and the self? Well, this is how we understand, how are you embracing the world? How are you reacting? How are you rationalizing your worth? Is there any shame or guilt that you're experiencing? Is there any resentment that you may have as you're experiencing the world, relationships, or yourself? And there is any regret, right? And if you notice, if I make this linear, right, I'm gonna make this linear just real quick. If I make this linear, what I'm talking about is the past, present, and future. So a lot of times in trauma, we deal with the past. And a lot of mental illness, we're worried about the future, especially with anxiety, right? And a lot of healing is being able to hold yourself present in during all those experiences. So that's linear. So I'm gonna make it more universal now, right? Mix that up. And so now that we understand that emotional malignancies are how you surround illness and stress and unrest, we learn that the liberation comes from finding principles, which is what's going to be on the next episode. So for your side quest today, what I want to do with you is the following. First things first, I want you to think about this cycle, right? Reaction, rationalizing, remorse, resent, regret. Ask yourself, how am I reacting to life right now? Number two, how am I rationalizing my worth? Am I really being authentic? How am I rationalizing myself? Third, how am I remorseful in this? Is there any shame or guilt about the way I'm not showing up for myself? How am I not showing up for myself? Then you have resentment. What do I resent about the things in my life right now? What am I resentful of? What am I upset about at life? What am I upset about the cards that are dealt in my life? What's the most frustrating thing about my life right now? And also regret. What type of power do I wish I had right now? What type of power do I wish I had? What power do I really need? What am I regretting right now in my life? What power did I wish I had to fix the things? Once you write those things out, I want you to think about the feeling, the emotion that comes from that. It might be anger. It might be sadness. It might be fear. Put that word in the middle of that cycle, right? Put a word in the middle. And then ask yourself, how does anger react? How does your rationalization act? How does anger act in remorse? How does anger act in resentment? How does anger act in regret, right? And just really go to understand how your anger reacts. Understand how your anger rationalizes. How does your anger remorse? How does your anger resent? How does your anger regret? Learn about it. These emotions are not bad things. Emotions are not good or bad. Emotions are emotions. And how we use them is how we express our identity. And if you cannot express your identity, I cannot ask you to be authentic with me, right? So let's work on this secondary healing process about learning how our emotions live in our body and how they live throughout the world and within relationships. So as always, be kind to yourself, and heal always.